Finally, the meta has settled a bit, and we have enough data to analyse all the new decks that have been arising with the amazing new expansion of Shurima. As the data has been a bit crazy since the expansion launch, it's taken a bit longer to produce this video, but I hope it was worth the wait. There's so many new exciting Shurima decks in this list I can't wait to tell you about. It's finally here, the video you've all been waiting for. This is Top 10 Decks Patch 2.3. This video has been done in collaboration with BomberTV. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications too. So let's dive in. Fiora Shen is primarily a Demacia deck which also features 13 cards from Iona. It's a mid-range deck which takes advantage of two keywords, Barrier and Challenger. So in other words, revolves around very simple combat where you're doing favourable fights and protecting your units. It's a fairly expensive deck featuring 5 epic cards. Value and flexibility are the keywords with this deck. Take as many value trades as possible, which is very easy with challenges such as Screeching Dragon and Fiora. Screeching Dragon is a great common card from the last expansion, and Fiora can simply act as a cheap free power challenger card here. Try to give them barrier with cards like Shen and Riposte. Shen gives a supported ally barrier this round, and Riposte gives an ally free damage and barrier this round as well. There are also lots of tricks to take advantage and punish your opponent with, like single combat and sharp sight. Note they both involve combat to kind of fit in theme with the deck. Single combat obviously allows a favourable fight, and sharp sight makes sure you're buffed enough to kill over a key unit or survive a key fight. If value doesn't win you the game, you always have the Fiora win condition, which is easily achievable with all the protection barrier cards you have in this deck, including Iona cards such as Spirit's Refuge, so overall a very solid deck fitting most playstyles and players. Ezreal Draven is a deck featuring cards from Piltover and Zorn and Noxus. It features a very balanced mix of spells and followers and has a very low average mana cost with all but 2 copies of Captain Farron costing 4 or less mana. It's relatively expensive featuring 5 epic cards. The core idea of this deck is to get your Captain Farron out as fast as possible and finish the game with him. To accomplish this goal, you need to do 3 things: draw him, survive, and do a little bit of damage before he comes onto the board. To accomplish the draw part, we have the so-called discard package. Discard to draw cards like Sump Dredger and Rummage are fantastic draw tools, which unfortunately would not really increase your hand size, but basically quickly cycle through your deck faster to get the cards you need. That's where Draven, Chomp Womp and Ballistic Bot come in. By generating cards which are not as very useful, you can use them as basically easy discard targets and replace them with more valuable cards. To survive, you have lots and lots of control tools, like Mystic Shot and Thermogenic Beam. Use these to take out your opponent's key cards. On top of that, all the units from the discard package are pretty good blockers too. Ezreal can be involved in your game plan, which also helps on the control side, giving you additional Mystic Shots. Finish off by summoning Captain Farron and using his Overwhelm and the Decimates he generates to quickly finish off your opponent. Captain Farron that appears in this deck got nerfed, and this deck is much more noticeable than all the others that he was basically running. So this deck is still super consistent though, which is why it's still pretty high on this list, but not the number 1 spot. Captain Farron. Ezreal Draven continues to be very solid, even though it's decreasing in viability, especially after that much deserved nerf to Captain Farron. Here is another deck you'll definitely recognise. It's Pyro Aggro, featuring cards from Noxus and Bilgewater. It's an aggro deck with a very mixed mana cost, with several cards costing all the different mana costs from 1 to 5. It's quite an expensive deck to build with 8 epic cards in total. The power cards here are Misfortune and Gangplank. Even if Misfortune will struggle to level up, she's here just a consistent way basically to level up Gangplank and make your board much more threatening on your attacking turns. Gangplank can then end the game against wide boards and therefore making aggro mirror matches quite easy with this deck. This deck wants to develop a board early on, and you can do this with a very quick start to the game with burn cards such as Lieben Saboteur and Jagged Butcher. Afterwards, it has a lot of ways to end the game with burn with units like Imperial Demolitionist or Jack the Winner. Jack the Winner creates a Sleep with the Fishes each round, which deals 2 to an ally to deal 2 to the opposing Nexus. You also have Zap Spray Fin, which will be able to draw you a Noxus for 4, always, as this is your only spell card with 3 or less mana, and this is obviously a fantastic card in this deck which can be very aggressive. If you reach late game, you can quickly close the game with Captain Farron and Decimate. Using the overwhelming Captain Farron and the pure bird damage from Decimate will quickly reduce your opposing Nexus to 0. So overall this is a pretty solid deck and a very fast one too, so if you want to rank up quickly, this is definitely an option I recommend. Pirate Aggro receives a nerf to Captain Farron, but some deck lists of this Pirate Aggro archetype don't even include him. So even if they do, you're going to have such a strong aggressive opener with 2 Decimates that it's probably going to be more than enough for this deck, so I'd say it's basically unchanged. Pirate Aggro is obviously an aggro aggressive deck, and when it's so early in an expansion, aggro decks like this one are always going to perform quite well, preying down on players experimenting with new unrefined strategies, so that's why loads of aggro decks are on this list. This is Twisted Fate Fizz Elusive and features cards primarily from Piltover and Zorn, even though the 2 main champions are from Bilgewater. It's actually quite an expensive deck with 7 epic cards in total on top of the 6 champions. It's very spell heavy with 25 in total and only 9 follower cards. The deck has a very strong ramp to mid game with lots of cards costing 0 to 4 mana. The 2 main ideas with this deck is level up Twisted Fate and kill with Elusives. It's as simple as that. When Twisted Fate is leveled up each round, the first 3 cards you play, anytime I hit a card, he activates a Destiny card, which I'll go into shortly about what these can do. To accomplish the first goal of leveling up Twisted Fate, you have plenty of drawing tools such as Rummage and Pick a Card. Rummage discards 2 to draw 2, and Pick a Card places a card from your hand into your deck to draw 3 cards in the next round, which are all going to have fleeting. All this drawing will level up Twisted Fate quick. After Twisted Fate levels up, the amount of value he generates is absolutely insane, even if he survives just a single round. The red card from Twisted Fate will crush aggro strategies with the wide damage it does to all your opponent's units, which are typically going to have little health if they're aggressive. Yellow card can set back the tempo of your opponent on the turn they're going for their finishes. Imagine how triggering it's going to be when you deal 2 damage and stun their boss card just as they're about to win. Blue card can generate more value and it's useful in a control matchup. Now imagine casting all 3 of them in the same round, all 3 of Twisted Fate's cards, which can easily be done with the amount of low cost burst spells that this deck runs. To finish and kill, we do this with Elusives and we mainly have Fizz and the hidden gem Wiggly Burblefish. If you start off with a Fizz, then draw on turn 2 into Suit Up, this can be devastating. Suit Up costs 2 less when drawn and sets a card's stats to 4/4. It will also activate Fizz's effect so he's untargetable and elusive. The 4/4 stat line is basically unremovable in the early games and can only be answered with the single target removals like Vengeance or multiple removals, giving you advantage on the value and baiting out removals for safer Twisted Fate later on, so he can obviously be generating the value of his cards. Wiggly Burblefish is also the best target for Imperative Improvement to push for more elusive damage while also protecting the generated copies from pings. This spell simply creates a copy of Wiggly Burblefish with the additional 1/1 stats. Twisted Fate Fizz was the best deck in the past meta and is now falling through in terms of viability, but still holds up the ground, so we'll see if she continues to decline or will rise back to the top. This is Sivir LeBlanc and features cards from Noxus and Shurima. It's quite spell heavy with 19 in total. This deck has no cards costing 5 or more mana, being in line with most aggressive decks. It's quite budget with 23 commons and 3 epic cards. The idea behind this deck is to activate Reputation as fast as possible whilst also trying to level up LeBlanc and Sivir. LeBlanc levels up when she sees you deal 15 damage and Sivir levels up when you've dealt 35 damage altogether, so some similar themes here about all dealing damage. Reputation activates if allies have struck for 5+ damage on at least 4 occasions in the game, so it also helps lead to these level up in turn, so you can see the pattern here. This deck has followers with over 5 damage that can help lead to reputation being activated. So early on you have Trifarian Glory Seeker, and later in the game you have the new Ruin Runner, which has Overwhelm and Spell Shield. You also have spells to help activate reputation. You have the new Bloody Business, where an ally with 5+ damage strikes an enemy. Additionally, you have the new Spell Shaped Stone to help buff allies enough to be able to deal 5 damage. LeBlanc is very easy to remove, but against certain decks with no removal she can be very aggressive and later on generate more copies of herself, which in turn can be generating more copies, and you get the picture. Sivir on the other hand is much more solid with spell protection already built in and a keyword designed to be good on attack, making her one of the best aggressive champions out there. Later on she can be a game winning bomb by giving protection to your whole board and maybe giving them overwhelm to go in for the win. So overall this is a very interesting deck, aggressive with some extent for some combos. This is Noxus Shurima Aggro and features cards from both Noxus and Shurima. It's very aggressive with a huge 30 cards costing 3 or less mana. The champions in this deck are Azir, Draven and Darius, and it's very budget with 24 commons and only 1 epic card needed. This deck is just straight up aggro. We're running the best of the best aggressive units. So ideally you want to start the game with Legion Saboteur or the new Dune Keeper. Legion Saboteur has 2 damage and deals 1 to enemy nexus on attack, and Dune Keeper also has 2 damage on himself and summons a Sand Soldier on summon, and this could provide up to another 2 damage. Then follow up with Legion Grenadier, or double up on 1-drops. So Grenadier obviously has 3 damage and deals 1 on death to the opponent. So the trend must be quite apparent here. You're basically really just trying to chip away damage at your opponent's nexus. Getting Azir is crucial on turn 3, as it can put so much pressure on your opponent. Azir can keep obviously summoning Sand Soldiers, who deal 1 damage to the enemy's nexus on attack, so just really good continued burn here. Shurima now shines bright with one of the best burn spells in the game, Ruinous Path. This obviously draws 1, and if you've slain a unit this round, drains 2 from the enemy nexus, so once again some fantastic value here to keep chipping away at the opposing nexus. Later on you have lots of burn cards, so think Decimate or Nox for 4. Decimate deals 4 to the opposing nexus, and Nox for 4 deals 3 to an ally to deal 3 to anything. You can target the opponent's nexus with this too, so overall it really kind of contributes to a really aggressive deck, and even though it feels quite repetitive, you're going to be climbing the ranks quickly with this one. This is Azir Nasus Shadow Isles and features cards from both Shadow Isles and Shurima. The mana cost of the deck is extremely spread out with loads of cards costing low mana and high mana. It's also fairly budget with only 2 epic cards needed. The idea behind this deck is to be very aggressive early on, get a bunch of slays, so that later on Nasus will be very big and you can only get him by casting Atrocity on him. Nasus gains 1/1 every time you slay a unit, killing an ally or enemy by using your cards via damage, strike or direct kill effects grant a kind of credit for slaying, so that's basically what you need to be looking out for in this deck. And Atrocity deals a unit's damage to anything including the enemy's nexus, so that's your overall game plan. To help us get to this almost win condition, we have loads of cards like Rite of Cooling or Glimpse Beyond, both of which help us get Nasus that we need for that big endgame finish. Rite of the Cooling kills an ally or destroys a mana gem to draw a champion, and Glimpse Beyond kills a unit to draw 2 cards. Both of these will get Nasus in your hand as soon as possible so you can start winning. We're also very aggressive and still synergizing well with the slay mechanic, for example, Blighted Caretaker or Rampaging Bacchae. Blighted Caretaker's saplings can slay cards, and Rampaging Bacchae's effect can simply help slay units himself. You also don't really need Atrocity to win the game as such, just a huge leveled up Nasus could be enough to win the game, if your opponent doesn't run hard removal, that is. When Nasus does level up, all enemies have -1. As you don't have the Sun Disc in this deck, you won't be reaching level 3 on him, so that's one thing to bear in mind. But overall this is an aggressive deck with the possibility of a 1-turn kill through burn on Atrocity. This is Aggro Kalista Shurima and features cards from Shadow Isles primarily, with some good support from Shurima too. Like most aggro decks, most cards have a low average mana cost, with 25 costing 3 or less mana in this deck. It's actually really budget, with no epic cards needed and only 3 copies of Kalista, the only champion in this deck, so this is great for players with little wild cards. There's not much going on in this deck as such. It's very effectively just efficient units from both Shadow Isles and Shurima. You ideally want to start the board with a 1-drop such as Ravenous Butcher for an explosive start, and then follow up with the Cursed Keeper into Blighted Caretaker. The rest of the strategy is fairly standard for an aggressive Shadow Isles deck. Shurima shines with one of the best burn cards in the game, Ruinous Path, and this card draws 1 if you've slain a unit this round and drains 2 from the enemy Nexus, so fantastic value here. You also have very efficient units such as Rampaging Bakai and Bakai Reaper. Rampaging Bakai on play has the effect if you've slain 4+ units this game, an enemy and him strike each other, and Bakai Reaper is 1 mana, fearsome and gains 1 damage every time you slay a unit. It's crazy that he only costs 1 mana. Kalista does her usual job of putting pressure on your opponent early on and then generating value in even more pressure later on once she levels up. So overall this is a really aggressive deck, looking to deal lots of damage early on and ending the game with burn damage. This is Discard Aggro, a deck you definitely recognise from previous deck lists. It features cards from Piltover and Zorn and Noxus and features 3 different champions, Teemo, Draven and Jinx. You can include 2 or any 3 of the combination here. The average mana cost is very low, with 23 cards costing 2 or less and 14 costing 1 or less. The most expensive card in the deck is Augmented Experimenter. The deck plan is quite simple. Against slow decks, try to finish your opponent as early as possible before they get their endgame. Against aggro or mid-range decks, you can try and win the race against them to see who can finish faster, or you can go for the value approach granted by the leveled up Jinx. Of course, you need to first draw her and then level her up. As the name suggests, the deck is all around discarding, so cards which can be both discard and draw are very desirable, such as Zornite Urchin and Rummage. The deck has a lot of options, smart plays, and therefore is a very skill-based deck. First of all, it's always important to know when to discard a card and what ones you should be discarding altogether. For example, there are obvious discard targets such as Flame Chompers, Jury Rig and Vision, and these are pretty straightforward what to discard. As for the when to discard a card, Jury Rig can be useful to summon a blocker or attack at burst speed, either punishing their open attack or to go in for the kill. The same goes for discarding Flame Chompers at burst speed, although it is much more useful to remove a big blocker so that your other units can basically go in and do what they need to do. Vision should be used to go in for the kill and take your opponent off guard, or to complete trades. This can almost be a win condition in some situations. With the new addition of survival skills, Discard Aggro seems to be getting a lot of love from Riot at the moment, and continues to be one of the best spots in the meta. Even if this list doesn't run survival skills, I would still suggest experimenting with it. This is Azir Lucian, and it features cards from Demacia and Shurima. I've classed this deck as a mid-range, even though it's quite aggressive and also has some combo potential. The average cost in the deck is more weighted towards low cost, with 16 cards costing 2 mana and 9 cards costing 1 mana. It's fairly budget with only 2 epic cards. This deck has a lot of things going on. The main idea is to take advantage of the when allies attack effect on both Azir and the Emperor's Dais to summon lots of sand soldiers and overwhelm your opponent with basically quite wide boards. As you can see on the screen, both cards have the effect to summon sand soldiers, so you can quickly sense the theme here. To achieve this pretty straightforward synergy, you can do it with scouts such as Grizzled Ranger. As a reminder for all new players, all your scout units can attack twice as long as your first attack is exclusively with scout only cards. Another attack-minded card is obviously Lucian, which has the rally effect that when a unit dies for the first time each round, rally means you gain an attack counter once again, and it obviously has this on his leveled up card. Lucian will almost always level up, as you're going to summon lots of ephemeral sand soldiers, which almost always guarantee an additional attack thanks to Lucian. Ephemeral means a unit dies at the end of the round on its first strike, so a very nice little combo here. Another card which is very strong here is the Inspiring Marshal, which can have a win condition on its own. He basically doubles the damage dealt by every Sand Soldier, which you can imagine is pretty strong considering how many you're going to summon, depending on how many times you attack. So overall this is a very aggressive deck with some nice combo potentials, meant for competitive players which basically like skill based decks. A lot of players were super excited about the Emperor's deck on Azir at level 3, many others were excited about Azir and Ephemerals. The latter won the race of which deck would be the most competitive in the end, and BomberTV has a more in-depth analysis on his deck on his channel, so please check it out in the card above. And there we go guys, I expect this list to change drastically over the following days, as even though we've got enough data to look at initial meta, it's going to be really kind of constantly evolving, and I guess it's kind of not fully solved yet, it's still kind of finding its place. So Bomber I will work around the clock to keep you updated on what the best current decks are as this list rapidly evolves. What do you think is the best new deck in Shurima expansion so far? I would love to hear in the comments. Up next is Best Meta Decks Patch 2.3, taking a look at the decks dominating this new meta once it finally settles. The data presented here is analysed by BomberTV using MOBA analytics. He's a master tier player with a background in game theory and game design. He took the most winning archetypes into master tier, excluding ones with small play rates, analysed their key properties on why they are so strong. Link to his channel is in a pinned comment and in the card above. I've recently set up an Instagram account, @LoreGuides, and I'll be doing a giveaway shortly. Please follow this account for see posts about new videos and for being a chance of winning this giveaway. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on bell notifications too. See you next time guys.